Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Here we are again. Types of demand. Second period. Still on the topic, concept of demand, but we want to discuss the types of demand here. One, we have four types of demand, and they are joint or complementary demand. We have derived or circuitous demand. We have competitive demand, and we have composite demand. We'll discuss this one after the other. By joint or complementary demand is a type of demand which occurs when two or more commodities. A types of demand which occurs when two or more commodities are jointly required to satisfy a particular want. When two or more commodities are jointly required to satisfy a particular want, then we refer to it as a joint or complementary demand. And an increase in demand for one will surely lead to an increase in the demand for the other commodity, because the two are jointly required to satisfy a particular want. Conversely, a fall in the demand for one commodity will lead to fall in demand for other. Example is that of car and petrol. There is no way a car cannot function without the use of petrol. So that's why we refer to it as joint demand, because the two of them are required to satisfy a particular want. Meaning, for a car to move, then there must be a fuel inside it. Then we talk of tea and milk. Take for instance a Lipton tea and a milk is required. So it's not good enough to take only Lipton. So people will provide the two, both Lipton and the milk, or talk of beverages, Bonfita and milk. The two are required to satisfy a particular want. So when it happens like that, we refer to such commodity as a joint or complementary demand. So as I've said earlier, increase in one will lead to the increase in the other, and the demand for the other commodity, and as well as a fall in the demand for one will surely lead to the fall in the demand of the other commodities. The second one is derived or circuitous demand. This one occurs when commodities which are required for the production of other commodity, the commodities that are meant for the production of other commodities, when they are required and not for the direct satisfaction of wants, we refer to such as a derived or circuitous demand. And demand for one commodity will necessitate demand for another. Demand for one commodity will necessitate demand for another. Examples that of wood. Wood here is required for furniture making. Wood is required for furniture making, and flour is demand for bread, snacks, and some other items that they are using flour for, like that. So when a commodity is required for further production of other commodity, we refer to it as a derived demand. The next one is competitive demand. Competitive demand here occurs with commodities which have close substitutes. As the name implies, competitive demand occurs with commodities which have close substitutes. So if the demand for one increases, automatically the demand for others will fall, because both perform the same function, and people cannot require the two together at the same time. So competitive demand occurs with commodities that have close substitutes. So if the demand for one increases, there will be fall in the demand for other. Example are that of tea and coffee. Good Mama and Magic, the two are detergents. So people either use either Good Mama or Magic, as the case may be. So the two cannot be required at the same time. So if there is increase in the demand for Good Mama, automatically there will be decrease in demand for Magic, and vice versa. If there is increase in demand for Magic, then there will be automatically the fall in the demand for Good Mama, as the case may be. So if the price of any of these pairs of commodities is high, the consumers switch over. To the other close substitute, which has a lower price, and that's why I used to say that bóyìnbó mu tíì máa mu kọ́, omi gbóná kan náà lájọ mu. Since they perform the same function, people would like to go for the one that has a lower price. Then the next one is composite demand. Composite demand is when a commodity can be used for more than one purpose. When a commodity can be used for more than one purpose, we refer to it as a composite demand. That is, when a commodity has several uses. Let's look at palm oil, for example. Palm oil is demanded to cook soup. We use it to cook soup. We use it to fry food. Some use it to make soap. They used to make is meant to make soap. So we use it to fry food. We use it to make caustic soda, soap, etc. like that. So a commodity that is meant to that is used for more than one purpose is referred to as a composite demand. We've talked about joint or complementary demand, derived demand, that is commodities that are meant to produce that are meant for the production of further commodities, competitive demand, where two commodities have close substitutes that will demand in one, increase in demand in one will lead to decrease in demand for the other, or fall in demand of other, because they perform the same functions. Then if the price of the one commodity is high, consumers switch over to the other close substitutes, because the one that has a lower prices. And the last one is composite demand, where a commodity can be used for more than one purpose. Now, what are the factors that are affecting demand? The major determinants of quantity demanded, that these factors affecting demand is talking about the major determinants of quantity demanded of a commodity. That is, the factors that will state the rate at which people will demand for a particular commodities. So the major determinants of quantity demanded of a commodity are one, price of the commodity. Price of the commodity. Here, the higher the price of any commodity, the lower the quantity that will be demanded, and vice versa. That is, if the price is lower, the rate at which people will demand will be very high, and if it is higher, automatically the demand will be lower. The price of other commodities, that is the price of other goods. The price of other commodities here, this applies to the commodities that have close substitutes, as in the competitive demand. So people would like to switch over to the commodity that has a lower price. Then income of the consumer. The higher the income of the consumer, the higher the quantity of commodities that he or she will demand, and vice versa. That if the consumer's income is lower, automatically the rate at which he or she will demand for a commodity will be lower. Then the fourth one is the population. Population here, increase in population in an area will surely lead to high demand for commodity, and vice versa. So if the population is lower too, then the demand will be low. Changes in taste of consumer. Change in taste of consumer. If the consumers change their taste for a particular commodity, then the demand for that commodity will also change. Then the next one is taxation. Taxation here is a topic on its own, but to briefly define it, is the compulsory payments imposed by the government on goods and people of that particular country. So a compulsory payment imposed on goods produced in that particular country and the people in the country as well. So increase in taxation means a reduction in the purchasing power of the consumers, which may result in decrease in demand for certain commodities. What I was saying here, increase in taxation, as you all know that tax will be deducted from people's income. So increase in taxation will reduce the disposable income. What is disposable income? The amount left from people's income after taxation has been deducted. So increase in taxation will reduce this disposable income, and this will in turn reduce the purchasing power of people. So thereby reducing the rate at which people would demand for a particular commodities. Then periods of festival. It is well known that people demand more of specific commodities during certain festival. It is well known that people demand more of specific commodities during certain festival, especially clothes, shoe and bags for the children and some other things like that. So the rate at which people demand for such goods during festive period will be higher. Then the next one is change in fashion. As fashion changes, people's demand for reigning fashion also changes, because people would like to use what is in vogue then. So as soon as the fashion changes, people's demand for the reigning fashion will also change as well. Then expectation of changes in price expectations of changes in price. If people expect that there will be high prices of commodities in the nearest future, demand will increase and vice versa, as in they will want to have it ahead of the time before the price changes. So as a result of this, maybe they've been told that by next month, the price of this particular commodity is going to be increased. The rate at which they will demand for it now will be very high, so as to save their cost against the period that it is going to be, against the period that the price is going to be changed, and vice versa. Then the next one is that of climatic conditions, weather and climatic conditions. This one, variations in weather and climate or seasons may affect demand for certain commodities. For example, raincoats, umbrellas and rainbows are highly in demand during the rainy season. So the rate at which people will demand for this kind of commodity as at this period will be very high. Then government policy is another factors affecting demand. Government policy over the consumption of some commodities may either encourage or discourage the demand for such commodity. If the government want people not to buy, automatically the demand for such commodity will be lower. And if government's policy encourage them to buy, then the demand will be high. And the last one here is advertisement. As it says going, ìpolówó ni àgúnmu òwò. A good advertisement for a commodity can lead to an increase in demand for it and vice versa. There are some products that people buy just because they like the advert. People buy some commodities because of the advert plays on them. So a good advertisement for a product can lead to an increase in demand for such commodities. Let's look at the law of demand. So all what we've said earlier are those factors that would determine the rate at which people will demand for such commodity. Law of demand now. The law of demand states that ceteris paribus, that is, all things being equal, the higher the price, the lower the quantity of goods that will be demanded, and the lower the price, the higher the quantity of goods that will be demanded. And let's look at changes in quantity demand now. Changes in quantity demand. This simply means movement along the same demand curve. Changes in quantity demand means movement along the same demand curve, whether upward or downward. Movement along the same demand curve, whether upward or downward. This is affected by change in price, while other factors such as income, taste, preference, as we have discussed it earlier, remain constant. So it is affected by the law of demand, which says the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. So it can be downward, which is an increase, or extension, or upward, which is a decrease in or contraction. This will be demonstrated on the graph on the board, inshallah rahman. So but what we should take into consideration here is that change in quantity demanded simply means movement along the same demand curve. We'll get it better inshallah when it is demonstrated on the graph on the board. Changes in demand now. Changes in demand is the complete shift, unlike changes in quantities demanded, which is movement along the same demand curve. This one is the complete shift of demand curve to the right or left. To the right, complete shift of demand curve to the right or left. To the right or left. Complete shift of demand curve to the right or left. So changes in demand occurs where there is a change in factors like price of other goods, income, taste, and fashion, while the price of the goods remain constant, meaning that this is just the opposite of changes in quantity demanded. There, price remain constant, and price of the goods remain constant here. So the shift in demand can be increased or decreased, meaning it can be extraction, be the extraction or contraction as that of the changes in quantity demanded. So increase in demand is a complete shift of demand curve to the right, while decrease in demand occurs when there is a complete shift of demand curve to the left as well. It will be demonstrated in the graph later. So let's look at abnormal or exceptional demand. Demand curve is said to be normal when it slopes downward from left to the right. Demand curves is said to be normal when it slopes downward from left to the right, while abnormal demand curves do not follow the law of demand do not follow abnormal demand curve do not follow the law of demand. So an abnormal demand curve slope upward from left to the right. It slopes upward from left to right. Some factors that may lead to abnormal demand curves are A. Luxuries or articles of ostentation. This one is talking about the expensive articles which snob appeal attract higher demand curve. The expensive articles that are meant for few categories now, well, it's one of the factors that can bring about abnormal demand curve. Then expectations of future rise or fall in prices. This one is talking about speculative transactions. That is the turnout, the rate at which people demand for a certain product when they know that the price is later going to be increased may be very high or low drastically. Then given or inferior goods. Demand for inferior or given goods may fall as their prices fall. There are some products that even if the price fall to the lowest, people will just close their eyes to that. Then e.g. a fall in the price of basic foodstuffs such as garri may lead to less being bought. A fall in the price of basic foodstuffs such as garri may lead to less being bought and extra income spent on purchasing other superior substitutes such as rice, beans, and so on like that. Because it's not everybody that consume garri. It's not every household that like, even if the price falls to the lowest, people will still demand at a small quantity. Then given goods therefore have an abnormal demand at lower prices, as I've said earlier. So it is also known as article of necessity. It is also referred to as article of necessity. Then the next one is rare commodity. Rare commodities such as antiques, that is old or out of date furniture and households, and old carving are regarded as valuables and are therefore attracts a higher demand at higher prices, because this thing is now meant for every household. It's either it is required at the museum or a studio, because it's not everybody that needs this. So the price, there used to be higher demand at higher prices, because it's only those that demand for it that knows the value or what they intend to use it for. Then expensive goods with many substitutes may create an abnormal curve too, which is perfectly or imperfectly elastic. Reasons for the downward sloping demand curve. 1. The law of diminishing marginal utility. Don't forget, we've talked about this in the previous class, sometimes last week, where the law states that the law of diminishing marginal utility states that the satisfaction derived from consuming successive units of a commodity will diminish or reduced as the total consumption of the commodity increases. So that is what the law states, the law of diminishing marginal utility states that the satisfaction derived from consuming successive units of a commodity will diminish or reduce as the total consumption of commodity increases. That's what the law says, and that is one of the reasons why there will be downward sloping demand curve. Then the law of demand, don't forget we said it when the marginal utility was treated, that marginal utility is the basis of the demand curve. So the law of demand, which says that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and vice versa, also indicates the reasons for downward sloping demand curve. Then income effect. The higher the income, the higher the quantity of goods or commodities that will be demanded, and vice versa. Then substitution effect. Substitution effect, we talk of the competitive demand for goods that have close substitutes. When the price for one increases, then people switch over to the one that has a lower prices. So with this one, we've come to the end of the class, the end of the topic. Types of demand, factors affecting demand, abnormal or exceptional demand curves, and the reasons for the downward sloping demand curve. So inshallah, the assignments will be posted at the portal on the assignment section for us to copy. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.